Commander Vex-Nine stared at the tactical display with the kind of expression you'd expect from someone who just watched their favorite coffee mug spontaneously combust. The human ship designation Sweet Caroline, because apparently humans named their vessels after ancient songs, sat dead in space like a gift-wrapped present. Too easy. Way too easy. Sir, the vessel appears to be experiencing total system failure, reported Lieutenant Crix, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. No weapons, no shields, minimal life support. Single life form detected aboard. Vex-Nine's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Finally, after 6 months of these humans making the Galactic Council look like amateur hour, they'd have a live specimen to study. The bounty alone would fund his retirement on Zephyr Prime. Just one human? He asked, leaning forward in his command chair. Affirmative, sir. Bioscan indicates. Curious. The life form appears to be significantly smaller than typical human parameters. Perhaps a juvenile? Now that was interesting. A human cub, alone and defenseless? The galaxy had been buzzing with stories about human tenacity, their ridiculous ability to survive impossible situations, their annoying habit of turning certain defeat into Pyrrhic victory. But surely a young one wouldn't possess such traits yet. Excellent. Prepare the boarding party. Full restraint protocols. I want this specimen alive and unharmed. Crix hesitated, her secondary arms fidgeting with her control panel. Sir, perhaps we should exercise additional caution. The reports about human unpredictability. Lieutenant, it's a child. A frightened, alone child, whose ship is falling apart. What possible threat could it pose? Vex-Nine's laugh rumbled through his chest cavity. Besides, look at that vessel. It's held together with what humans call duct tape and prayers. Hardly intimidating. 20 minutes later, Vex-Nine was beginning to suspect the universe had a wicked sense of humor. The boarding party had easily breached the human ship's hull. The airlock practically opened itself, as if inviting them in. Too inviting. The corridors were dimly lit, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, creating an atmosphere that would have been ominous if they weren't dealing with a helpless human cub. Movement ahead. Sir, whispered Sergeant Toth, his plasma rifle held at ready position. Something small, consistent with a juvenile human. They rounded the corner and there it was. A small human figure, maybe half the size of an adult, crouched behind what appeared to be makeshift barricades constructed from furniture and spare parts. The creature wore a bright yellow garment with some sort of primitive artwork depicting a 4-legged animal. Its hair was an unusual auburn color, tied back in what humans called a ponytail. There's our prize, Vex-Nine muttered into his comm. Approach carefully. Remember, we need it alive. The human cub looked up as they approached, and Vex-Nine was struck by its eyes. Large, bright green, and absolutely fearless. Not the reaction he'd expected from a cornered child. Hello there, little one, Vex-Nine said in his most soothing tone, switching to the basic galactic standard that most species could understand. We're not going to hurt you. We just want to talk. The human cub tilted its head, studying them with an expression that was far too calculating for someone so young. When it spoke, its voice was steady, clear, and carried an undertone that made Vex-Nine's scales prickle with unease. You know, mister. Whatever you are. That's exactly what the last group said. Last group? Crick stepped forward, scanner in hand. Child, what last group? We're the first to board your vessel. The human cub smiled then, and Vex-Nine felt his confidence take a swan dive into the nearest black hole. That smile belonged on something with far too many teeth and a taste for violence. Oh, you mean the Hegemony Patrol that found me 3 days ago? Yeah. They said the same thing. Real nice folks. Very polite. Right up until they tried to put me in a cage. Sergeant Toth shifted nervously. Sir, perhaps we should scan for other life forms again. This doesn't feel right. The scanners show one life form, Sergeant, one small, harmless human child. But even as he said it, Vex-Nine was starting to doubt his own words. There was something about this situation that felt like walking into a carefully prepared trap. The human cub stood up slowly, brushing dust off its yellow garment. You know what the funny thing is? Everyone always assumes I'm alone. Poor little human girl, all by herself in the big scary galaxy. She paused, that unsettling smile growing wider. Thing is, I'm never really alone. Child, we've scanned this vessel thoroughly. There are no other life forms present. That's because you're looking for life forms you recognize. The human cub began walking toward them, completely unafraid of the armed soldiers surrounding her. See, humans have this really annoying habit of making friends with things that other species prefer to forget exist. A low growling sound echoed through the corridor, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Vex-9 soldiers raised their weapons, scanning the shadows frantically. What was that? Crix demanded, her scanner beeping erratically. That, said the human cub cheerfully, would be Biscuit. He's been sleeping since we started our little chat, but I think you guys woke him up. He gets cranky when people interrupt his nap. The growling intensified, and now Vex-9 could hear something else claws on metal. Deliberate, measured scratching that suggested whatever was making the sound was in no particular hurry. It knew its prey wasn't going anywhere. Biscuit? Toth's voice cracked slightly. What kind of creature is called Biscuit? Oh, he's not a creature. Well, not exactly. The human cub sat down cross-legged on the floor, as if she were having a pleasant picnic instead of being surrounded by armed aliens. See, my mom used to work at something called a wildlife rehabilitation center back on Earth, place where they took care of injured animals before releasing them back into the wild. The scratching sound was getting closer, accompanied by what could only be described as the most menacing purring sound Vex-9 had ever heard. One day, she brought home this little guy. Tiny thing, really. Couldn't have weighed more than a couple kilos when he was full grown. Cutest little face you ever saw. She called him Earth's perfect evolutionary middle finger to the concept of proportional response. Crix was backing toward the exit now, her scanner showing readings that made no sense. Sir, I'm detecting massive thermal signatures, but they're not registering as life forms. It's like whatever's out there doesn't conform to standard biological parameters. That's because Biscuit's special, the human continued conversationally. You see, most animals on Earth have this thing called self-preservation. They know when they're outgunned, when they should run, when they should back down. Biscuit never got that particular memo. A shape moved in the shadows beyond the flickering emergency lights. Something low to the ground, moving with the fluid grace of a predator that had never met a threat it couldn't handle. Vex-9 caught a glimpse of black and white stripes, small but powerfully built, with claws that looked like they could shred hull plating. By the 7 moons of Proxima, whispered Toth. What is that thing? That, gentlemen and lady things, is a Terran honey badger. Scientific name Mellivora capensis, also known as the Raytel. Also known as nature's way of proving that size absolutely does not matter when you have the attitude of a small, furry apocalypse. The creature that emerged from the XTTB shadows was indeed small, no bigger than a medium-sized dog by galactic standards. It had a distinctive black and silver coat, small rounded ears, and eyes that held the kind of cold intelligence usually reserved for apex predators. But what made Vex-9's blood freeze wasn't what he could see. It was what he couldn't see. The honey badger looked at the assembled soldiers with the casual interest of someone deciding whether to order pizza or Chinese takeout. Then it yawned, revealing teeth that seemed far too large and sharp for such a small creature. Here's the thing about honey badgers, the human girl continued, seemingly oblivious to the fact that her pet was causing 4 trained soldiers to contemplate the meaning of existence. They're not particularly big. They're not particularly fast. But they have one quality that makes them absolutely terrifying. What quality? Vex-9 asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. They don't care. About anything. Ever. You could be a lion, a leopard, a pack of hyenas, or apparently a squad of heavily armed alien soldiers. Biscuit looks at all threats the same way as minor inconveniences that need to be removed from his general vicinity. The honey badger took a step forward, and every weapon in the corridor swung to track it. The creature paused, tilted its head as if considering something profound, then made a sound that could best be described as a cross between a laugh and a chainsaw starting up. The Hegemony Patrol made the same mistake you're making right now, the girl said sadly. They assume that because Biscuit is small, he must be manageable. Poor guys. I tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen. What happened to them? Crix asked, though her tone suggested she really didn't want to know. Well, Let's just say their ship's debris field is currently providing valuable nutrients to the local space plankton population. Biscuit doesn't like cages, or restraints, or being told what to do, or people who threaten me. Really, he's got quite an extensive list of things that annoy him. The honey badger began moving again, not toward the soldiers, but past them, as if they were merely interesting decorations. It padded over to the human girl and nuzzled against her leg with the affection of a creature that had never met a problem it couldn't solve with sufficient application of violence. Good boy, Biscuit. These nice aliens were just leaving. Vex-Nine found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. Child, surely we can come to some arrangement. The Galactic Council would be very interested in establishing peaceful relations with humans. Oh, I'm sure they would. Right after they finished dissecting me to figure out what makes humans so stubborn. The girl scratched behind the honey badger's ears, and the creature made a sound like a diesel engine being tickled. But here's the thing, Commander, yes, I know what you are. Your uniform's got more decoration than a birthday cake. I'm not exactly standard human material. What do you mean? My name's Zoe Martinez. I'm 12 years old. I've been traveling with my mom since I was 7. And I've been taking care of Biscuit since he was a baby. You know what that means? Vex-Nine shook his head, afraid to ask. It means I've spent 5 years learning how to think like something that considers a charging rhinoceros to be a minor Tuesday afternoon distraction. It means I've been trained by someone who dedicated her life to understanding Earth's most extreme survivors. And it means. She paused, her smile taking on an edge that made Vex-Nine's species' fight-or-flight response suggest very strongly in favor of flight. It means I've got absolutely nothing to lose and a best friend who considers impossible odds to be his natural habitat. The honey badger looked up at the soldiers and made that chainsaw laugh sound. Again. Then it did something that would haunt Vex-Nine's nightmares for the rest of his very long life. It winked. Now, Zoe said pleasantly, you gentleman and lady have exactly 30 seconds to get off my ship before Biscuit decides you're overstaying your welcome. And trust me, when Biscuit makes that decision, things get messy very quickly. You're bluffing, Toth said, though his voice lacked conviction. It's just one small animal. Zoe's laugh was pure delight, the sound of someone who'd just heard the funniest joke in the universe. Oh, Sergeant, that's exactly what the last guy said. The honey badger began walking toward the soldiers, not hurrying, not aggressive, just moving with the inexorable patience of a natural disaster. Each step seemed to echo with the promise of violence that would be both creative and thorough. 20 seconds, Zoe announced cheerfully. Vex-Nine looked at his team, then at the small human girl, then at the honey badger that was regarding them with the interest of a connoisseur examining a particularly challenging puzzle. The creature's eyes held a gleam that suggested it had already figured out 17 different ways to turn this situation into a learning experience for everyone involved. Sir? Crix asked quietly. Orders? Vex-Nine watched as the honey badger sat down and began methodically cleaning its claws. Each movement was precise, economical, and somehow deeply threatening. Retreat, he said finally. Full retreat. Now. Sir, it's just one small lieutenant. Have you ever seen what a honey badger can do to a full-grown Earth lion? No, sir. Neither had I until I accessed the Terran database files an hour ago. Let's just say that size is not an indicator of lethality when it comes to Earth species. Vex-Nine began backing toward the exit, his eyes never leaving the seemingly innocent creature. Especially not when they're protecting something they care about. As they retreated, Zoe called out behind them. Hey, Commander, tell your bosses something for me, will you? What? He called back without stopping. Tell them that humans aren't the scariest thing in the galaxy. Her voice carried a note of pure, innocent truth that made his scales crawl. We're just the ones brave enough to make friends with the things that are. The last thing Vex-Nine saw before the airlock sealed was the honey badger sitting next to the human girl, both of them watching the departure with identical expressions of mild amusement, as if this entire encounter had been nothing more than a brief, entertaining intermission in their day. As his ship pulled away from the Sweet Caroline, Vex-Nine sat in his command chair and tried to process what had just happened. They'd attempted to capture a single human child, and had been driven off by something that weighed less than his breakfast. Sir, Crix said quietly, what do we report to command? Vex-Nine stared at the human ship, which was somehow no longer showing signs of system failure. In fact, it appeared to be running at full capacity, as if the entire stranded vessel scenario had been an elaborate performance. We report that human children are not suitable targets for capture operations. And the creature, sir? Vex-Nine watched as the Sweet Caroline powered up its engines and began moving away at a speed that suggested its systems had never been damaged in the first place. We report that Earth species defy conventional understanding of threat assessment protocols. He paused, then added with grudging respect, and that 12-year-old humans apparently have tactical awareness capabilities that exceed our own. As the human ship disappeared into hyperspace, Vex-Nine made a mental note to recommend immediate policy changes regarding human contact protocols. Specifically, a new rule stating that any vessel showing signs of distress should be approached with extreme caution, especially if it contained anything from Earth, especially if that something had made friends with a honey badger. Because apparently, in the vast and dangerous galaxy, there were worse things than apex predators, seasoned warriors, or weapons of mass destruction. There were Earth creatures with attitude problems and the humans who loved them. And as Vex-Nine was beginning to understand, that combination was absolutely, positively, completely unfair to everyone else in the universe. 3 hours after what would later be known as the Honey Badger incident, Fleet Admiral Korath was having the kind of day that made him question his career choices. His office aboard the flagship, Eternal Dominance, buzzed with activity, as reports flooded in from across the sector. "Admiral, we've lost contact with Hunter Squadron 7, reported his aide, Captain Yelex. Last transmission indicated they were pursuing the human vessel. Korath's forearms drummed against his desk in a rhythm that suggested barely controlled frustration. That makes 12 patrols in the last 6 months. 12. All chasing after one supposedly helpless human child. Sir, with respect, perhaps the child isn't as helpless as initial reports suggested." Korath's laugh was bitter as overcooked stem root. "Captain, I've read the files. 12 years old. Traveling alone after her mother's research vessel was destroyed in an asteroid field. Should have been the easiest capture operation in the history of the fleet." What Korath didn't know was that at that very moment, Zoe Martinez was sitting in the pilot's chair of the Sweet Caroline, feet dangling because she wasn't quite tall enough to reach the floor properly, having the time of her life. "Okay, Biscuit. What do you think? Should we let them catch up, or should we give them the runaround for a while longer?" The honey badger was sprawled across the navigation console like he owned the place, which, in fairness, he basically did. He opened one eye, looked at the pursuing ships on the display, then made a sound that could charitably be described as dismissive. "You're right, they're being boring. Same old tactics, same old formations. Mom always said that predictability was the enemy of good science." Zoe pulled up the communications array and began composing a message. "Let's give them something to really think about." Meanwhile, back on the flagship, Korath was dealing with his own problems. The latest patrol to encounter the human had returned with a report that defied rational explanation. "Admiral," said Commander Vex-Nine, still looking slightly shell-shocked, "I respectfully request immediate reassignment to the Outer Rim, preferably somewhere with no atmosphere and no indigenous life forms. Commander, you encountered one human child." "One? Sir, it wasn't the child that was the problem." Vex-Nine's mandibles clicked nervously. "It was her, a companion. The reports mention an Earth creature called a honey badger. Our xenobiology department assures me it's a small omnivore, non-sentient, minimal threat assessment. Sir, with all due respect, your xenobiology department has never seen one of these creatures in action." Vex-Nine pulled up a holographic display. "I've spent the last 3 hours researching Earth fauna. Did you know that honey badgers have been recorded successfully fighting off entire packs of Earth's apex predators? That they routinely raid beehives protected by thousands of insects whose venom can drop a creature 50 times their size? That they've been observed breaking out of supposedly escape-proof enclosures with nothing but determination and bad attitude?" Korath studied the display with growing unease. The creature looked harmless enough. Small, compact, rather cute in an odd way. But there was something about its eyes that suggested it was calculating the most efficient way to dismantle whatever it was looking at. "Surely you're exaggerating the threat level, Commander." "Admiral, this Creature once broke out of a reinforced containment facility by climbing a tree, jumping onto a rock wall, crossing a river, and then returning the next day to break out again, apparently just to prove it could. Vex-Nine's voice took on a note of profound respect mixed with terror. When asked why it came back, the human caretakers said it was probably bored. Before Korath could respond, his communications officer interrupted with barely concealed panic. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel, audio and visual. Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what appeared to be a standard transport ship's bridge. Sitting in the pilot's chair was indeed a human child, small, with bright auburn hair and wearing that same yellow garment that had featured in all the reports. She was eating what looked like a sandwich and appeared completely unconcerned about being pursued by half the Imperial fleet. "Hello there," she said cheerfully, waving at the camera with her free hand. "I'm Zoe Martinez, and this is my ship, the Sweet Caroline. I understand you folks have been looking for me?" Korath leaned forward. "Human child, you are in violation of Galactic Council Directive 847. You will surrender yourself for processing immediately." Zoe took another bite of her sandwich and considered this. "You know, Admiral, nice ship by the way, very impressive. I've been thinking about that directive. See, I did some reading during my last hyperspace jump, and technically, Directive 847 only applies to human vessels operating without proper documentation. Your vessel is clearly operating without authorization codes." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong." Zoe's smile was the kind of innocent expression that made experienced military officers reach for emergency tranquilizers. "See, the Sweet Caroline is registered as a mobile research station under the Terran Wildlife Conservation Authority. My mom was Dr. Elena Martinez, senior xenobiologist. I'm her designated heir and current operator of this facility." Korath felt a familiar sinking sensation. "What kind of research facility?" "I'm so glad you asked." Zoe set down her sandwich and picked up a data pad. "We specialize in the behavioral analysis of Earth species in non-terrestrial environments, specifically, how they adapt to the challenges of space travel and interaction with non-human entities." "And the creature we've heard so much about? Biscuit?" "Oh, he's my primary research subject. We're studying the adaptation patterns of Mellivora capensis in various stress scenarios." Zoe's expression took on the earnest enthusiasm of a dedicated scientist. "The results have been absolutely fascinating. For instance, did you know that honey badgers become more territorially aggressive when confined to small spaces, or that they develop enhanced problem-solving capabilities when presented with novel obstacles?" Commander Vex-Nine made a strangled sound. "Admiral, she's been using us as test subjects." "What do you mean?" Zoe tilted her head with theatrical innocence. "Well, every time one of your patrols tries to capture me, Biscuit gets to practice his defensive behaviors in a controlled environment. It's been incredibly valuable data. I've documented 17 distinct tactical approaches he's developed for dealing with different types of threats." On cue, a small black and white head appeared at the edge of the screen. The honey badger looked directly at the camera with what could only be described as a smug expression, then disappeared again. "That creature is weaponized," Korath said with dawning horror. "Oh no, Admiral. Biscuit isn't weaponized. That would imply someone deliberately turned him into a weapon." Zoe's laugh was pure delight. "Biscuit is just being himself. The weaponization is entirely natural." Captain Yilex leaned over to whisper in Korath's ear. "Sir, I'm receiving reports from our scout ships. They've detected what appears to be a debris field approximately 47 parsecs from here. Composition suggests it's the remains of several hegemony vessels." "How several?" 17 ships, sir. All apparently torn apart by something with very small but very sharp claws." Zoe must have overheard, because her expression brightened considerably. "Oh, you found the hegemony fleet?" "Yeah, they were really persistent. Kept trying to board the ship, even after I warned them about Biscuit's personal space issues. Poor guys just wouldn't listen to reason. You destroyed 17 warships with that thing?" "I didn't destroy anything, Admiral. I just failed to adequately restrain an Earth mammal experiencing territorial anxiety in a confined space. Technically, It was an unfortunate accident resulting from insufficient understanding of xenobiological behavioral patterns. Korath stared at the screen, trying to process the implications. A 12-year-old human and her pet had single-handedly eliminated a hegemony battle group, and she was treating it like a minor laboratory mishap. Human child, what exactly do you want? Well, that's simple. I want to continue my research. I want to honor my mother's memory by advancing our understanding of interspecies cooperation, and I want people to stop trying to kidnap me. Zoe's tone became more serious. See, Admiral, here's the thing about humans that nobody in the galaxy seems to understand. We don't like being told what to do, especially by people who haven't bothered to ask nicely first. And if we were to ask nicely, Zoe's smile returned bright and genuine. Well then, we might have something to talk about. For instance, I've got about 6 months of research data on honey badger behavioral adaptation that the Galactic Council's Xenobiology Department would probably find fascinating. I've also got detailed behavioral analysis of 43 different species combat responses under stress. You've been studying us. Admiral, I'm a scientist's daughter traveling with an Earth predator. Of course I've been studying you. Did you know that Rigelian officers tend to retreat in perfect formation, while Centaurian troops prefer to scatter and regroup? Or that hegemony soldiers have an average panic response time of 4.7 seconds when confronted with unfamiliar Earth fauna? Commander Vex-Nine buried his head in his hands. She's been taking notes. Oh yes, very detailed notes. My mom always said that good science requires careful observation and accurate record keeping. Zoe held up a thick journal. I've got behavioral profiles on pretty much everyone who's tried to capture me, including psychological assessment matrices and tactical prediction algorithms. The honey badger reappeared on screen, this time carrying what looked suspiciously like a dismantled piece of military hardware. He set it down next to Zoe's chair with the pride of a cat bringing its owner a dead mouse. Good boy, Biscuit. Is that from the last boarding party? Zoe examined the device. Oh, nice. This is a Rigelian tactical scanner. These are really well made. We can probably use this for the atmospheric pressure studies. That scanner was classified military equipment. Well, it's educational material now. Biscuit has this habit of collecting interesting technology from people who visit our ship uninvited. I've got quite a collection at this point. Zoe gestured off-screen. Weapons, armor, communication devices, even a couple of escape pods. Biscuit seems to think they're toys. Korath felt his career prospects evaporating like moisture on an airless moon. What do you propose? Simple. The Galactic Council recognizes the Sweet Caroline as a legitimate research vessel. I get left alone to continue my work. In exchange, I'll share my research data with accredited xenobiology departments and stop accidentally destroying fleets that get too close to my ship. And if we refuse? Zoe's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Well, Admiral, that would be unfortunate. You see, Biscuit's been getting restless lately. All these encounters with your ships have been good exercise for him, but he's starting to get bored with the same old tactics. I'd hate for him to start getting creative. The honey badger chose that moment to look directly at the camera again. This time, it was holding what appeared to be a plasma charge between its teeth like a chew toy. It bit down experimentally, and the device sparked ominously. Dear gods, whispered Yelex, it's playing with explosives. Oh, he loves those things. The sparks are pretty, and the bang they make when he figures out how to activate them properly is really impressive. Zoe reached down to scratch behind the creature's ears. Last week he figured out how to jury-rig 3 plasma charges into what I can only describe as a very localized space-time disruption device. The physics should have been impossible, but apparently nobody told him that. Korath made a decision that would later be regarded as either the wisest or most cowardly moment of his career, depending on who you asked. The Galactic Council will consider your proposal. Wonderful. I'll send over my preliminary research files as a gesture of good faith. Fair warning though, some of the video footage is a bit graphic. Biscuit doesn't really believe in half measures when it comes to problem solving. The transmission cut off, leaving Korath's bridge in stunned silence. After a long moment, Yelex cleared his throat. Admiral, your orders? Korath looked around at his crew, all of whom were staring at him with expressions that ranged from bewildered to terrified. Finally, he made an announcement that would echo through Imperial fleet records for generations. Issue a fleet-wide directive. All vessels are to maintain a minimum distance of 50 parsecs from any ship displaying Terran registry codes. Any captain who attempts to engage a human vessel without explicit authorization from Fleet Command will be immediately transferred to sanitation duty in the Outer Rim. Sir, surely that's excessive, Captain. In the last 6 months, that 12-year-old girl and her pet have eliminated more enemy vessels than our 3 best battle squadrons combined. They've done it without firing a single shot, and they've done it while conducting a science project. Korath paused to let that sink in. I don't know about you, but I have absolutely no desire to find out what happens when humans actually decide they don't like us. 3 days later, the Galactic Council received a formal proposal for the establishment of the first human-Terran xenobiological research initiative. The proposal was accompanied by several hours of video documentation, showing what happened when various species attempted to threaten a human child and her honey badger companion. The proposal was approved unanimously in record time, and somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, a 12-year-old girl and her best friend continued their research, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the best way to make friends was to convince everyone else that making enemies would be a really, really bad idea. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humans that day. They might be small, they might seem harmless, they might even be genuinely friendly, but they chose their companions very, very carefully. And when you mess with a human, you don't just get a human. You get everything the human considers family, including, apparently, small furry creatures with the tactical sensibilities of a guided missile and the disposition of a caffeinated tornado. The universe, as it turned out, was a much more interesting place when humans were in it, even if you were never quite sure whether you were going to survive the experience.